Medusa, one of Greek mythology's most legendary creatures, comes with one of Dungeons & Dragons' most underused mechanics. The biggest reason for this is because many dungeon masters view petrification as way too strong for lower level parties, while also being too simple to handle for higher level ones, specifically parties level 9 and up, since Greater Restoration is a 5th level spell. And so the goal of today's encounter, apart from making it fun, engaging, and abiding by this lovely Patron's Challenge, is to create a Medusa Encounter that fully utilizes petrification at lower levels, but without completely kneecapping your players. Hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to my hidden nerdy side, and today we're tackling the snake-haired ladies known as Medusa. We are going to take a look at their lore, info, and abilities, and then build an encounter you can steal, modify, and plop straight into your D&D games. And to make sure this video is a decent length, we'll only be pulling the Medusa lore, info, and abilities that exist in the Monster Manual, which can be found on page 214. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Medusa. In D&D, Medusa suffer from an immortal curse brought on by their vanity, which is quite a bit different from traditional Greek mythology, and for a good reason. I won't talk about it in this video, but seriously, Google why Medusa was actually cursed, cause it's really messed up. But basically, men and women seek out higher powers, whether they be dragons, archdevils, or even malicious gods, and then they offer themselves to them in exchange for the gift of beauty, restored youth, immortality, and the adoration of all who lay eyes upon them. With these incredible physical gifts, Medusas can use their mesmerizing appearance to gain immense influence and power. However, these deals usually have an expiration date, and once it passes, the chosen men and women are turned into Medusas, transforming their hair into a bunch of venomous snakes and turning anyone who gazes upon them into stone, essentially becoming the exact opposite of what they once were. Because of this, Medusa tend to live in remote and secluded areas, and because a Medusa can be turned to stone by looking upon themselves, their lairs typically don't contain mirrors or reflective surfaces of any kind. But for our upcoming encounter, we might just have to change that up. Now, when we jump over to their actions and abilities, there is some cool stuff. They can make up to 3 attacks per turn, and can also make attacks with their venomous snake hair that deal a fair amount of damage. However, their cornerstone ability is, of course, their petrifying gaze. Basically, any creature that can see the Medusa's eyes and starts their turn within 30 feet of it must make a DC 14 Constitution saving throw. If they fail, the target begins to turn to stone and becomes restrained. At the end of their next turn, they can make the saving throw again, but if they fail again, they become petrified. However, if you fail the saving throw by 5 or more, you're petrified right off the bat, and remain petrified until Greater Restoration or better magic reverts you back to your fleshy self. Now, there is a lot that goes along with being petrified, but what it mainly boils down to is your players can't do shit. But what I will point out is the wording in the ability specifically states the Medusa can force the target to make a saving throw, not that it has to, which implies your Medusa can choose to not look at a target. Now, considering Medusas can be turned to stone by their own ability also implies this doesn't function as a toggle on and off sort of feature, but your Medusa is by no means required to petrify someone looking at them. However, if your Medusa does intend to, there is a way to avoid being petrified. Unless you're surprised, a creature can avert its eyes to avoid a Medusa's gaze. But remember, if you're not looking at a creature, your players are basically under the blinded condition when it comes to interactions with it. So whenever you run a Medusa encounter, just be ready to have a bunch of people running around staring at the ground, which, trust me, is actually much more fun than it sounds. Now, when it comes to homebrew changes, we're only going to make one change. Instead of the Medusa needing to be able to see the chosen creature, the target just needs to be able to see the Medusa's eyes. Now, this might sound like a redundant, silly change, but trust me, it's a very crucial distinction that will be pivotal in our upcoming quest. But now that we've gone over the basic Medusa lore, info, and abilities, let's build an encounter. This encounter/quest will be aimed at parties level 5 to 9, depending on how difficult you want to make it, and last about 1 to 2 sessions, depending on how long you want to stretch it out. The party's motivation should always be tailored to your campaign, but for simplicity's sake, we'll keep it really basic and say your party just needs something from someone. Yeah, really basic. However, this person will be located in a secluded area, and the party will not be aware that the person they seek is actually a Medusa. So, again, what your party needs from your Medusa is totally your call and campaign dependent. To keep it simple, we'll just say it's some magical quest item. However, whatever you decide it is, there are 2 requirements you need to meet. 1, your players should 100% need it, and more specifically, need to take it with them. And 2, your Medusa needs to believe she can't let anyone else have it. Basically, you want to avoid your players just leaving the item there, but you also want to have justifications for why our Medusa is doing all the crazy stuff she's going to do, but we'll get into that a bit later. Now, what will be notable about our Medusa, who we'll say is a woman named Mira, is she became quite famous for her beauty among certain circles and used her influence to deal many black market goods. But several years ago, Mira had a change of heart and began to use her influence for good. She started donating to charities, setting up homeless shelters, and so on. However, a little while ago, Mira seemingly disappeared and hasn't been seen since. Your players will be recommended to speak with a young man named Weston, who is currently in charge of Mira's enterprise. If your players let Weston know what they're after and can convince Weston that they have nothing but the best intentions, Weston will share what he knows. If they can't, they'll have to find some other way to get the information from him, either through interrogation, sneaking into his office, etc. But what they can discover is during her days in business, she acquired an old abandoned temple belonging to some good-natured god, and this temple lies in a remote location. People won't know why Mira acquired it, but Weston will recommend your party try looking there. So that is everything your players will know going into this. But now, let's talk about Mira a bit. Customize her any way you see fit, but she would have been a vain, despicable, and lonely person in her early days who no one really paid any attention to. She assumed it was because of her poor looks, and so sick of being looked down on, or even worse, flat out ignored, she approached a higher power of some sort and was given the gift of beauty, immortality, and everything that comes with being a Medusa. There was a caveat though. Mira needed to use her newly granted gifts to better serve the higher power who bestowed them upon her. This seemed like a fantastic deal at first, as Mira used her power and influence to conquer the economic world and collect tons of information and goodies for this evil power. But eventually, she felt unfulfilled and empty, as many of her relationships were hollow or surface level, since they were all for the sole purpose of both parties furthering their own greedy goals. Her many mansions and full coffers didn't fill the void in her heart, because what she ultimately wanted was a meaningful connection, a relationship that provided more than the promise of future riches. But one day, Mira noticed an orphan boy begging in the street. Mira gave him a silver coin and went on her way. Then she noticed the child the next day, and so on and so on. And each day, Mira would give him a silver coin. After a couple of weeks, Mira started to wonder what the child was doing with all this money, and she found out this young boy was using the money to buy food for not just himself, but several other homeless beggars purely because it was the right thing to do. Mira was moved and ended up adopting the boy, starting her charitable works, and slowly shifted away from her shady dealings. Now this obviously didn't fly with the higher power who invested his time and effort into Mira, who eventually activated the curse on Mira, turning her into a Medusa. And unfortunately, her adopted son was in the room when this occurred, which turned the boy to stone. However, before this occurred, Mira acquired acquired whatever important item your players are after, and this item is also important to the higher power who gave Mira her gifts. And so, to spite the higher power who cursed her and caused her adopted son to become petrified, Mira took the item, discovered the location of an abandoned temple, purchased the land the temple lies on, hid herself within it, and fortified the temple for when the higher power, your big bad, or anyone would come for it, for it's too dangerous to be put in the wrong hands. Now, Weston is the only other person who knows Mira is a Medusa. Like I mentioned earlier, if your party convinced him they are just and good, he will reveal where the temple is, but he will not say Mira is a Medusa. This is because Mira and Weston pre-arranged a deal, where if a powerful force for good were to ever inquire about the item, he would send them over to her so Mira could test just how capable they are, for the average person cannot be trusted to keep such a powerful item safe. Now, how your players eventually find out all this extra lore surrounding your Medusa is up to you. Weston can end up slipping in a few extra details without giving away the crucial bits we talked about earlier. Your players could find stuff in Weston's office revealing more information, there could be journals or notes found at the temple, and of course, if they talk to Mira herself, she will reveal it to them. However, she will only tell them once she's near death, for only then will she deem them strong enough to carry the item for her. So now that we've gotten all that delicious backstory out of the way, let's talk about how the temple combat will go down. Now, when your players arrive at the temple, the first thing they'll notice is a fountain with crystal clear water in the center of the room. This fountain will be famous for being able to cure many ailments, and used to be frequently visited until monstrosities known as Kruthix flooded the area, making it too difficult to travel to. You can read more about Kruthix on page 211 in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Secondly, they'll spot a series of different statues throughout the foyer. Some of the statues will be of different monsters, some will be humanoids, and some, upon investigation, may even resemble servants of your big bad and or the higher power who gave the Medusa her gifts, giving your players a hint a Medusa is nearby. Also, there will be weird markings on the walls starting at around 4 feet high and going up to 6 feet high. These markings will appear to be random and sporadic. There will be divots in certain places, raised bumps in others, and so on. And finally, there will be a hallway leading further into the temple, and eventually a series of underground corridors. These underground corridors will be short but plentiful, and they'll also be filled with mirrors, puddles on the floor, polished suits of armor in random places, and chests where shiny gold coins rest. Now, you might be thinking, Matt, I thought Medusa wouldn't risk having so many reflective surfaces. What gives? Well, dear viewer, normally you're 100% right, but remember our incredibly crucial homebrew change? Well, if our Medusa was required to see her target, this would be a dumb layout. However, when our Medusa only needs the target to see her eyes, we can then make our Medusa blind. This allows her to freely walk around without risk of petrifying herself, while also making it much more dangerous for her opponents. Now, Mira won't be permanently blind, but will make and drink a special concoction to turn herself blind whenever she needs to, so she can travel throughout her corridor of reflective surfaces. And this is why all the weird markings on the walls exist. She uses them as a form of braille to always know where she is. So Mira will wander throughout her maze, and your players have to avoid looking at the water, suits of armor, shiny gold coins, mirrors, and any other wacky surface you decided to use to bait your players while she attempts to petrify your party and also sends Kruthix she's tamed to attack your players. If your players do look at Mira's eyes or see their reflection, they'll notice they have a foggy white appearance and no pupils. This is due to the blinding potion's effect. However, they'll notice the Kruthix also have foggy white eyes, because they'll be blind as well to avoid seeing the Medusa. But Matt, how will the Kruthix get around? Well, why do you think I chose Kruthix? Because they got tremor sense, baby! They don't need to see. And so your players will take on Mira and her small gang of Kruthix, and if they get her low enough, let's say down to 25 HP, she will give up and ask about your party's intentions for the item. If your party's intentions are pure, she'll just give it to them, but if they aren't, she'll fight to the death. We'll say Mira has about about 4 to 6 young Kruthiks and 1 to 3 adult Kruthiks depending on your party's size and skill. And for extra ridiculous shenanigans, what if Mira outfitted these Kruthiks with shiny pots, pans, or makeshift armor, creating even more reflective surfaces and causing your party to have to avoid their gaze from the Kruthiks as well. Now, of course, your party can flee and return, which is why this temple has the special fountain I mentioned earlier, because if your party retrieves their petrified members, they can soak them in the water, turn them back to normal, and try again later. This might seem like a ridiculous design flaw, because why would a Medusa have a fountain in her lair that can cure petrification? Well, actually, that's specifically why she chose this temple, because she wanted to use its waters not only to unpetrify targets that come to her temple so she can question them, but she needed its waters to cure her adopted son. Where's her son now? Well, of course, it's Weston. So, a blind Medusa that's somehow more deadlier than one with sight? I think this is all quite spicy enough, but if we wanted to, how can we make it even spicier? Well, what if your big bad's minions or the minions of Mira's higher power come to attack the temple while your party is still there, allowing your players to fight on Mira's side and figure out how to fend them off while also avoiding Mira's gaze? You could also allow your players to drink the blinding concoction if they wish, and have them try and stop the evildoers from soaking their already petrified minions in the magic fountain during combat. And finally, you can make Mira a powerful wizard or magic user of some kind. What crazy spells could you give her to make this encounter even wackier? Unfortunately, ones that rely on sight are out of the question, but you know what doesn't require sight? Dimension Door. That would allow Mira to appear right in front of your players for a good old surprise petrification. But anyways, this is just one of many ways you can use Medusa in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. But if you do use this in your future games, make sure to let me know how it goes. And I'm always looking for spicy challenges, so make sure to comment them below. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.